on the history of special education. And I wanted to do this just to let you all know, because I was kind of got over in special ed by accident and found that I was a lot of times lost and hearing all kind of terms and legal terms and all kind of interesting things I wasn't aware of and didn't know anything about. So I decided to research it on my own and just kind of figure out what the world of special ed is all about, go all the way back to the history of the beginning of special ed. It was very interesting, and I think that you would like to learn about it and hear about it as well. All right, so what I did learn was that special ed is not, the definition of special ed is educating students with special needs in a way that takes into account their individual differences and needs. Special education involves individually planning and systematically monitoring teaching procedures, adapting the educational environment, materials, and providing adequate access to settings. That's what it's all about. What I also learned that throughout the 20th century, people with disabilities were often placed in institutions along with people with mental illnesses. And they were usually inhumane facilities where little to no education took place. This type of treatment was acceptable to the majority. It was encouraged. And even in the states had laws that prevented blind, deaf, emotionally disturbed, or mentally retarded, that was the term, but now we use mentally disabled children from attending school. So that wasn't right, and it was like that for the longest, but it was not right. All right, so what really started happening to kind of get the ball rolling with special education advocacy was the civil rights movement, and all this kind of took place just in the recent years, in the 60s, which is probably a little bit over 40 years ago. President John F. Kennedy kind of got the ball rolling because he had a sister and he had a sibling who had special needs. And so he kind of took that to heart and he looked into it, trying to get legislation passed. And he just about got it passed, but he was assassinated. So when he was assassinated, President Lyndon B. Johnson took over and he went ahead and got it passed as a bill. Not only were these two involved, it was also the Education for All. It was a movement by a group of parents, a group of mothers from out of the state of Washington who had special needs children, and they kind of got together and they felt like something needed to be done, and they brought their bill or their write-up to the state, and they were able to get that passed. Another major landmark was Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, and that was a major landmark decision in education, where they were saying that it was wrong to segregate children in education according to skin color. So those were the main four movements that kind of got the ball for special education rolling. So on my timeline here, I'll say that everything kind of started around mid-60s, late 60s with President John F. Kennedy, and of course he was assassinated. So when he was assassinated, Lyndon B. Johnson took over. Okay. The Education for All, HB 90, the Civil Rights Movement, and Brown versus Board of Education. All right, so then this is when we got our first major bill passed for special needs children, and this was called Education for All Handicapped Children Act in 1975. Of course, that term is kind of outdated and old now. Now we use say special needs, or disabled, but back then the term was handicapped. But it required there were three main things it did. It required all public schools to accept federal funds to provide equal access to education and 1 free meal a day to students with mental and/or physical disabilities. Public schools were required to evaluate handicapped children and develop an educational plan with parents that was as close as possible to the regular education experience. Schools had to provide parents and families with the necessary support systems along with support for due process. And they had to provide federal funds to schools to help educate students with disabilities. So that was the Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975, also known as EHA. All right, so throughout the 70s and there were a few things that did happen, and this is my sign that says integration of special needs students in the public schools. One thing that kind of stood out from the 80s was the Reagan administration was in office, and President Reagan tried to kind of disable the education EHA, and he wasn't successful at it, but he did take away so many billions of dollars for disabled children. He was able to get that taken away. So, but other than that, it stayed in effect. It's still in effect today. Throughout the 70s and 80s, institutions were broken up and students with special needs were integrated into schools. In the 1980s, the Reagan administration tried strongly to disable EHA, but only succeeded in stopping the Social Security benefits of hundreds of thousands of recipients who were disabled. Okay. Then he head on into the 90s, and then that's when children with disabilities laws that were passed really picked it up a notch. In 1990, EHA, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, was changed to Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA. Okay, and that occurred in 1990, and it required all students with a disability of free education, specifically designed to meet their unique needs, so they would have the same opportunities that regular education students have. And there are 6 main parts to IDEA. It's an individualized education program, an IEP. So by law, a child with a disability who's in the education system has to have an IEP, which is a legal document stating whatever their disability is, and it's a plan that's written up to show how a teacher or how the school system has to provide accommodations and modifications to help this child succeed in school. It's a legal document, it has to be followed to the T. Part number 2 was a free and appropriate public education. So parents shouldn't have to come out of their pocket at all. Shouldn't have to spend a dime to get their child with special needs any type of service they need, whatever they need. Number 3, which is very important, is called the least restrictive environment. So a lot of times schools will say, okay, well, we have the child at the school, and they'll try to still sneak them off and put them in a whole different room to themselves, and claim that they are following IDEA. But that's not IDEA. And this is a major component of it. So we have to have those children going into regular ed classrooms. They have to participate with regular ed students. If not, schools can be in deep trouble if they don't follow this, because they have to be in there. It can't be just saying that they're stuck in there. They have to be actually participating with children who do not have special needs. This is number 4, the appropriate evaluation. Okay, so parents should not have to come out of their pocket if they feel like there's something wrong, or if they just know that there's something just quite not right. Instead of being afraid to take their child to the doctor because evaluations are very expensive, the school system can pay for that as well. They can just allow the child to come to the special ed department and they can test the child. And it's free as well, appropriate evaluation. By right and by law, a parent has the right to have a say-so in their child's education. So whatever the school system wants to come up and do, feel like whatever idea they want to get together and implement with the child, they cannot do it without their parents' permission. The parent has to sign and give the okay for that. Even now, I know with IEP meetings, I have to have a parent there. I don't have to, but the parent has to sign whatever legal documents and papers we have in order for us to work with the child, because if not, then we could be getting a lot of trouble. Number 6, procedural safeguards. That means that the child has to know and feel that they are always safe and safe from harm, or do not feel like they come to school, get bullied or anything like that. It has to be, they have to know that they're coming to school and they're going to be safe and protected. Procedural safeguards, as well as a parent has to know that they have a right to speak up for their child, and they have to know their rights. So 7 is confidentiality. No, nowhere on the IEP now, started last year, can the child's name be mentioned specifically. We have to use their initials, because we have to make sure we keep confidentiality as our top priority. Nobody needs to know who this child is, who their parents are. It's supposed to be top secret. Also, part 8 was the transition services. So once the child get to high school and they're ready to graduate, we have to have, the school system has to have some type of program set up where they can transition into the real world instead of just thrust them out there and they're on their own. It has to be some type of program set up where they can transfer and make a smooth transition from school to some type of formal work program. Number 9, discipline of a child with a disability. That's very important too. A lot of times, special ed is made up of children who have a lot of behavior problems. So, of course, they're going to get sent to the office all the time. They're going to be in trouble. I'm dealing with that now with a couple of them. But they cannot be suspended based on just their behavior. It has to go through procedures, and we have to show that we follow the behavior plan, and that we did all we could, and that the behavior that they're getting suspended for, we thought to be suspended for, is not tied to whatever the disability is. So we have to be careful with that. And also, number 10, prohibition on mandatory medication. So we can't go to a parent and say, we know that that child could probably do much better on some type of medication that might maybe Ritalin or some type of Adderall to help them settle down. But we can't go to them and tell them we put on some medicine. You know, we get a lot of big trouble with that. We have to let the parent come to their own decision and take them to the doctor. The doctor can suggest it, but we're not supposed to. Okay. And these are all the disabilities covered under IDEA. Okay, autism spectrum disorder, okay, because autistic, it falls along the spectrum, it can be mild, and then sometimes it can go up to a level of being very severe. There are some children who have multiple disabilities, okay, IDEA covers them. Some children have a traumatic brain injury, it's either from an accident or from birth, so they're covered under IDEA. They're allowed to come to school. They get the free education, speech, language impairment, intellectual disability, visual impairment, blindness, deaf or hearing impairment, deaf and blindness, developmental delay. That just means that for some reason they can develop past their whatever growth stage they're in, maybe a 3-year growth stage mentally. So we have to take that into account. Emotional disturbance, they just go off for no reason, or they cry for no reason, emotionally disturbed. Specific learning disability, they just cannot learn for whatever specific reason. They sometimes don't know what it is, but they have trouble learning, they struggle with learning. Orthopedic impairment, these are children who may have some type of physical disability. Maybe they can't walk, or they have a problem with their arm, or hold pencils. And of course, another one is called, the last one is other health impairments. And that just simply means that the child has some type of sickness or disease, and that can affect their behavior and how they learn. Yes? This time? All right, next. All right, so all this took place in the 90s. Some issues, there are always constant debates going on about special education, especially now that it's mainly mainstream hard to agree with just one frame of thought on that. Another issue is teachers struggle with the lack of resources required for integrated inclusion. Okay, so they have a lot of kids coming to them who have special needs, but sometimes they don't have the resources. So if you have a child in there who struggles with singing or can't, has to have things blown up or has to have maybe a special machine that blows stuff up so they can see it. If the school doesn't have money to pay for that type of machine, then, you know, the child struggles. So it's just, and teacher struggles too, because it means that she has to do a whole lot, or he has to do a whole lot of other things to try to go around and try to meet that need that that child has. And another debate is over sometimes is it fair to educate students who are severely disabled. So if a child is in a vegetative state and they just can't even really respond or can't just lay there, is it fair to teach that child, you know, to try to teach them when, you know, you have to face reality? So, all right. And since it was first enacted in 1990, idea has come up for an amendment, and it has come up a few times for other things that have, other laws that have taken place and had effect on it. So, for instance, one of the main ones was President Bush's No Child Left Behind Act. Okay. All right, so President Bush's No Child Left Behind Act had a clause in the statement that he wanted highly qualified teachers, and he wanted children with disabilities or special needs to be able to take state assessments as the same without any type of accommodations or modification, just like regular schools. So that was a big one for teachers. It was hard for them to do it, and they're still kind of reeling from that because it's hard to see children who are struggling already, and they're required to still take the state exam without any type of alternative or some kind of way to break it down at that level. There was also an addition of Part C that was in 2011. That was an amendment, and that just added all kinds of stipulations about early childhood because they realized that early childhood is such a crucial time in a child's life. Okay, so they set up all type of new things such as child fine. You know, it's free now to take your child if that's from 1 to 3. If you feel like there's something going on with them, you can take them to a school district, or you can take them to your local education agency, and they can test them for free to see if something's wrong. And if there is, then they can come to your house and work with your child for free. Some places, I think they charge maybe a small fee, but that was put in place. And then in 2009, President Barack Obama signed the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, also known as the Stipulation Package. And when he did that, he pumped in $12.2 billion in funds in the idea, and that provided more money. So it's it was very helpful, and still at the same time it was very, some were critical of him and some were praising him, but that's what he did. So all right, so that is the history of special education from the 60s up until now, to the mid-2000s. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.